Good morning, good afternoon. Mm, I would like to welcome you all at the partner session for the Open Government Partnership Global Summit that will be starting tomorrow in South Korea. And the panel session is called Stronger Alliances Against Corruption in Procurement through the Lens of OGP, which is organized by the Institute for Development of Freedom of Information, IDFI, and I'm the co-founder and executive director of IDFI. With this, I'm more than happy to express my gratitude to OGP for the cooperation and for uh, support to organize this panel, and to all our partner organizations who agreed to take part in today's discussion and present on our panel session. Unfortunately, we still have to do it online. We don't even have the hybrid session. It's purely online, and I hope that we will end this pandemic together, and starting from New Year, we will be able to meet again and have such interesting sessions and meetings together on site and on place. Currently, I'm attending the ninth conference of the state parties to the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, and open and transparent system of public procurement is considered as one of the most important tools of preventing corruption. And indeed, transparent public procurement systems are absolutely vital for both the effective functioning of a state and in the global expenditure and procurement, and in fact, the giving the World Bank estimates of nearly 9.5 trillion US dollars spent in the global procurement, according to UN. 10 to 25% of the value of a public contract may fall victim to corrupt behavior. And creating public procurement systems based on the principles of transparency, competition, and integrity has never been more important, considering the current environment and the global ongoing crisis that arose due to the COVID-19 pandemic. It pushed the topic of public procurement to the forefront and raised the importance of this issue, and with the governments worldwide struggling to meet the challenges of the pandemic through the purchases of crucial goods and services. Implementing systems of e-procurement, electronic procurement based on best international practice is one way to tackle these challenges. At the same time, with the rise of emergency procurement conducted in an accelerated manner, publishing open data, timely reporting, and enhanced monitoring by stakeholders became especially important. For example, in Georgia, as of July this year, coronavirus-related costs amounted up to 80 million Georgian lari, with many purchases through the so-called simplified procurement. The monitoring of which by my organization, IDFI, revealed multiple instances of suspicious and potentially corrupt contracts. With the newfound urgency, as well as the magnified attention paid to issues such as transparency of beneficial ownership, the extractives industry, and others taking towards improved public procurement systems is of utmost importance worldwide. This is recognized by the OGP as well, with open contracting and procurement specifically highlighted as a key direction under the anti-corruption policy area. The direction is also vital to meet multiple goals of the 2030 agenda. The only goal 12, ensuring sustainable consumption and production patterns names procurement directly. It is in fact crucial for the achievement of other goals of SDGs, including Goal 8, 9, 12, 16, and 17, in order to ensure greater prosperity and sustainable management of public funds. With OGP being a global partnership and revitalized global partnership for sustainable development being named central to achieving the global 2030 agenda, international alliances tackling the topic of public procurement are thrust into this spotlight. Pooling expertise, best practices, and various tools and mechanisms together, it becomes possible to push for the better and more transparent procurement systems with enhanced support from peers across countries and continents. Backed by such networks, local CSOs are empowered to push for better legislation and standards, advocate more effectively, and share international practice with their governments and local partners. So our speakers, brilliant experts of the topic at today's panel will highlight various examples of this in action. According to the current OGP priorities, contracting commitment that incorporate higher levels of civil participation and public accountability are the next frontiers in this direction. And international alliances play a crucial role in this regard. Moreover, with the stated goal of bringing in new allies like journalists and business, such initiatives can provide both the framework and the context for new stakeholders to become involved with the area of public procurement and OGP in general in this regard. The sharing of information, research, and expertise through these global alliances provides an excellent environment for local stakeholders to monitor, assess, and advocate for better procurement practices. In terms of advocacy, the backing of international initiatives is extremely useful for getting governments to take notice of problematic issues. The OGP has achieved remarkable results in this regard, and regional and global CSOs provide further support in the process of shaping more transparent and accountable procurement systems in the participating countries and beyond. Once again, panel speakers will share examples and expertise in this regard today. So we are gathered not only to listen to me, but as I've mentioned already, we have very prominent speakers, good experts of the topic, and I would like to introduce them to you. We have Vian Suerte Cortes, consultant, thematic policy areas representing open government partnerships. Vian is currently a consultant thematic policy areas at OGP, as I mentioned. Prior to joining the OGP, she was an independent consultant with HIVO Southeast Asia and managed the Philippine portfolio of the Open Up Contracting and the Making All Voices Count program. She's also worked at the affiliated network for social accountability in East Asia and Pacific, where she led the team that successfully advocated for the institutionalization of the Citizen Participatory Audit Program in the Philippines Commissions on Audit. From time to time, she has also internationally consulted on projects that involved anti-corruption, open contracting, and public procurement, social accountability, stakeholder engagement, and public finance management. Vian received her master's in public management from the Ateneo de Manila University and her bachelor's degree on community development from the University of Philippines. She's based in Philippines, and welcome you, Vian. We have Karolis Graničkas, Senior Program Manager for Europe representing Open Contracting Partnership. IDFI is a very strong ally and partner organization. Thank you very much, Carolis, for being with us. I'll introduce you for those who do not know and have not yet met Carolis. Carolis, before joining Open Contracting Partnership, worked with Transparency International Lithuania, Lietuva, as we Georgians call this country, and focusing on citizen engagement using ICT. He also contributed to global open data advocacy efforts together with the EPSI platform, Open Knowledge International, Open Data Institute, and others. From 2014 to 2016, he was a national researcher within the Open Government Partnership Independent Review Mechanism. Carolis earned his bachelor's degree in the international law from the University of Westminster, UK, and master's degree in the European Union law from the University of Maastricht in Netherlands. Carolis will speak and inform us about some great new examples of progress from Italy, Lithuania, and elsewhere in Europe. We have Sandor Lederer representing, and he's the executive director of K-Monitor, the Hungary-based non-governmental organization. He's the co-founder and director of K-Monitor, a grassroots anti-corruption initiative based in Budapest. K-Monitor was founded to improve the levels of transparency in the rule of law in Hungary. Civil participation and technology-driven solutions are among the organization's key instruments. Besides K-Monitor's tech focus, the organization is also active in anti-corruption advocacy and research with a strong focus on good governance on the local level. Sandor is a 2018 Obama Fellow and an Ashoka Fellow. Sandor will talk about the collaborative activities related to public procurement that K-Monitor did recently. Very interesting projects such as Tenders, Guru project, and other projects, including BI tools at Reflex EU, etc. We have Kristina Zeliska, Innovation Projects Program Manager, Transparency International Ukraine, and a member of the compliance committee of the complaints committee at the SOE Prozoro sale. She has extensive experience of implementing the best practices of transparency and efficiency, monitoring, training, and consulting in Ukrainian public procurement more than 5 years. In Transparency International, Ukraine manages projects on developing and providing electronic instruments for reducing the corruption risks in the spheres of economic sector of Ukraine, public procurement accounting, and managing state and communal assets, transparent state-owned enterprises, financial reporting, etc. Christina will discuss how they build a strong alliance for fighting corruption in public procurement through monitoring and advocacy in Ukraine. And last but not least, we will have Sandro Rochikashvili representing IDFI. He's the project manager of Transparent Public Procurement Rating, the initiative that IDFI started in cooperation with the partners in 2016, and starting with few countries involved in this network. Currently, we have more than 40 countries, and we are promoting the improvements in the legislation of public procurement. Sandro is the project lead of TPPR project, oversees the TPPR network, seeking new partners and ensuring the quality of assessment conducted within its framework. He has previously worked on topics related to the open government partnership at IDFI, as well as open data and general transparency related issues. Sandro received his bachelor's degree in public and international affairs from Princeton University. He was a recipient of the Princeton in Asia Fellowship. within the framework of which he spent time working at the university in Kazakhstan. So, with this, I am happy to have our session opened. We have several questions for the speakers. What are some of the greatest challenges in the achieving better, more transparent public procurement systems, and how do regional, global civil society alliances help us in overcoming these challenges? How can they best support OGP and how can OGP best support them? What are the avenues for cooperation between these initiatives and the local governments? What kind of support do regional global CSO alliances need to best achieve their goals? What, in your opinion, dear speakers, are the most effective ways of engaging the general public in the activities of regional or global CSO alliances, and what kind of activities can these alliances implement to lead to improvements in procurement systems worldwide? As you see, lots of questions, and I'm sure we will have very interesting answers. Vian, we can start with you as you represent OGP at our session, and please provide the information how OGP, with whom IDFI and TPPR, in particular TPPR project, has been actively cooperating since 2020, how you have supported public procurement improvements globally. Thank you very much.
Okay, I hope everyone hears me and sees my screen. Thank you, Georgie, for the very kind introduction. Celebrating the 10th year of OGP made me remember how long ago I first met you during the London Summit. So my presentation today will focus on how OGP has helped promote open contracting and public procurement and make this as a cornerstone of open government, which basically enables reformers to pilot and scale procurement systems that serve the public interest and fight corruption. So this quote from our CEO, Sanjay, sums up how OGP sees its role in fighting corruption through the OGP process. By helping to fight corruption, he says, practices improve health, education, and ensure civic participation. Open government helps leaders deliver for their citizens between and beyond elections. So at the end of the day, this is basically how we hope to see government serves its people. Okay. So fighting corruption is one of the priority thematic areas that OGP seeks to address through the co-creation and implementation of action plans. And OGP members tackle corruption through prevention, detection, investigation, prosecution, and sanctions in areas such as beneficial ownership, open contracting, and money in politics. The number of local and national governments advancing open contracting has been growing. In the early years of this work, just 10% of OGP members focused on open contracting. But by this year, in 2021, 3 in 4 OGP members have implemented open contracting and public procurement reforms. This growth has helped establish open contracting as a global norm, which is basically an unwritten standard of good governance. Currently, 20 OGP members are implementing commitments from their 2019 or 2020 action plans. Altogether, we have a total of 58 OGP members who have made 110 open contracting commitments since 2011. OGP members have also increasingly integrated open contracting into commitments in other policy areas and sectors. For example, some countries have focused on implementing open contracting in the natural resource governance sector, while others have worked to make open contracting data interoperable with company ownership data. Open contracting commitments yield positive results, and commitments around open contracting and public procurement have delivered some of OGP's most transformative results based on the independent reporting mechanisms data. 1 in 3 contracting commitments have resulted in significant changes to open government practices, making it one of the most highly rated policy areas. In terms of commitment performance, I already said that 1 in 3 have delivered strong results in opening government. Therefore, this is something that is very important for us to take a look into as to how it transforms government. At the global level, the OGP platform has helped translate high level conversations on international commitments into ground level action. OGP's recent analysis found that embedding global pledges into national action plans ensure better follow through. For example, several members have used their OGP action plans to put into practice pledges to open up contracting, like those made during the 2015 G20 meeting and the 2016 UK Anti-Corruption Summit. While global forums such as the G20, the IACC, or even the SDGs framework provide critical opportunities to galvanize collective action, they also run the risk of having limited impact unless they are translated to concrete actions and results at the national level. Analysis by the Transparency International found that at least 20 countries embedded some of their commitments from the 2016 London Anti-Corruption Summit in their OGP action plan, leading to more accountability for implementation rather than just being limited to mentions in speeches and statements. The OGP Support Unit and the Steering Committee have also worked with international partners such as IDFI, Open Contracting Partnership, HIVOS, COST, Development Gateway, Open Data Charter, the Natural Resource Governance Institute, Publish What You Pay, and EITI to grow and sustain a global network of contract transparency reformers. Taking a closer look at the Philippine experience and how the OGP platform has been very instrumental in ensuring that government follows through with their promises, I wanted to share that at first, there was extreme difficulty in trying to advocate for open contracting as one of the key reform areas of the national government. So not only was it something that CSOs thought was very technical and therefore difficult to implement and sustain, government also thought that existing laws and policies on public procurement were enough. And this is where the OGP platform helped a lot because local and national actors for both South Cotabato and the national government commitment were able to use the platform to advocate for open contracting at national and local levels. OGP Week, which is an annual activity, an annual event organized by OGP, was basically used as an entry point to influence the government agenda in early 2018. This led to South Cotabato and several national government agencies to express their interest in pursuing open contracting reforms. Next, we made use of regional and global summits because it became an opportunity to learn from peers, be inspired, develop relationships among local actors and international experts, and be able to celebrate wins in open contracting. Believe it or not, at least in the Philippines, this is something that's very important when you have the opportunity to be able to share small wins and celebrate this, not only at the local level, but at the global platform as well. So this basically helped strengthen the resolve of both government and civil society reformers to continue implementing OC reforms. And in relation to the OGP process of co-creation and implementation support, this was very helpful because it became a mechanism to keep the open contracting advocacy and programs move forward. So co-creation started with the development of a civil society agenda, which basically included a call, a demand to implement open contracting. The support unit then had organized a commitment design workshop. And this became a space. At that time, HEVOS, when I was with HEVOS, this became a space for HEVOS and some of our local partner CSOs to expand the vision of PhilJeps and South Cotabato in terms of not just looking at technical fixes, but also ensuring that civil society engagement is actually built in and weaved into the process. So this brings attention to the value and use of procurement data, not just as something to be posted online, but something to be used for advocacy purposes and evidence-based policy making. So OGP as a platform also cultivates country-level coalitions. This is an example of what has happened in the Philippine experience. So the OGP process fosters collaboration between reformers from government and civil society that often results in ambitious reforms. So, for example, Kenya's process facilitated coalition building around the shared goal of implementing open contracting. These kinds of coalitions helps deliver stronger results than individual coalition members who would have achieved on their own. In terms of supporting inclusive local participation, the platform creates a space for citizens and civil society, including those from underrepresented communities, to improve open contracting commitment design and implementation. For instance, in Elgeyo Marakwet in Kenya, the government committed to enabling citizen feedback and oversight over procurement decisions and project implementation. At the national level, Kenya is ensuring access to contracting opportunities to groups that are often left out of the contracting process by requiring that 30% of public procurement opportunities be awarded to women, youth, or people with disabilities. And under sector level partnerships, the OGP platform is a very useful tool for open contracting standards in other high impact areas, such as extractive industries and beneficial ownership transparency. So, an example of this is Malawi and Panama. By applying construction sector transparency initiative standards, they were able to prompt the government to create accessible channels for citizen feedback, to publish open procurement data on public infrastructure projects. We also have seen real world impact in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic. So this makes it very clear what is at stake if procurement remains very opaque, because public procurement systems around the world are under unprecedented pressure to secure medical supplies at the most efficient rates possible. In this context, corruption risks in public spending undermine effective life-saving action. However, because of previous open contracting commitments, several national and local governments were up to task. And these are the examples you see on screen. We have Ukraine, who have been implementing the Prozoro and Dozoro platforms. We also have Paraguay, in which they were able to publish all COVID-19 emergency procurement data on its platform in easily searchable forms according to OCDS. And we also have Ecuador that developed the public contracting transparency platform linked to emergency purchase for the pandemic. So this was done in collaboration between the National Public Contracting Service and civil society organizations. So when we speak about tackling corruption, I think we have to recognize that it can never be a purely technical fix. And there is certainly no silver bullet for reform. The complexity of corruption requires governments to take a holistic approach. It has to be a sustainable effort and needs to be linked to strengthen democratic institutions with strong legislative frameworks and a robust enabling environment for civil society, media, and the public to participate. There must be a system of oversight that enables accountability, basically having a constellation of actors from multiple branches and levels of government together, as well as civil society, citizens, and businesses. So while open contracting commitments have resulted in a number of critical successes, much still remains to be done. The pandemic has exposed the continued fragility of many public procurement systems. Additionally, where contracting is opaque and rather than open, corruption is given a free rein to fuel democratic backsliding. Broadly, the OGP support unit and the steering committee continues to collaborate with partners to institutionalize open contracting as a global good governance norm. So in doing so, OGP will encourage reformers to make procurement data more actionable by linking it across key government sectors. OGP will also continue shaping incentives, pushing for high quality sustainable data that's delivered on time, and bringing in new allies like journalists and businesses to the table. And finally, OGP will continue to work with reformers to better address remaining implementation gaps, including in public monitoring of contracting data and citizen feedback loops to ensure that citizen inputs are always acted upon by government. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian, for sharing such interesting information about the activities you are providing. And as I have already mentioned, OGP is the global platform to enhance and advocate for improvements, including in open public procurement systems. And I think that we as civil society organizations and alliances in this regard should use this platform to advance, to advocate with governments, to share the experiences we have. And thank you once again for providing this information to us and to the audience about how we can do that. And I'm sure there will be more questions in this regard. And before I move to our next speaker, Carolis from OCP, I want to once again mention that we have the Facebook Live, and everyone who would like to ask a question can either comment on on our Facebook page under the comment section, or can those who are attending our conference through the Zoom platform can write the questions in the chat category. So, Carlos, I would like once again to express my gratitude to you for joining, and I'm very happy to be a partner organization to OCP, the global leader in open contracting and moving forward and advocating for the open contract data standards. And I'm sure you have a lot to share with us, and those new achievements and new success stories on open contracts. So, floor is yours, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Georgi. I hope you can see my slides. I hope you can hear me. I hope you can see me. Thank you so much for having us, both IDFI and also GP. Thank you, Vivian, for actually giving a very comprehensive overview of where we are with open contracting globally. That was very useful. 110 commitments, with 1/3 of them being transformational or having a good effect, is a good figure. It's a good figure. So it's a good session to try and understand and dig deeper into the elements of it. So I cannot cover open contracting in its entirety in 10, let's say. Let me understand how this works. In 10 minutes, we'll have to focus on something that I have been asked to focus. But very quickly, open contracting, just to recap, as a solution, as a philosophy, is essentially about three things. First of all, publishing open contracting data. Secondly, engaging people, and that's something that I will focus on today, in monitoring procurement. And thirdly, with the goal to improve procurement policies. Right? So the ultimate goal that we keep in mind on a daily basis at OCP and hopefully globally is better service delivery, better lives of people, measurably better. So this is the idea of open contracting. Now, we found ourselves, just think about the life back in 2000 and now in 2021. I mean, it has changed dramatically. If we thought we live in modern times back then, just think about where we live right now with the revolution of data, with revolution of technology, social media rise and everything. And the challenge, of course, is governments responding to those trends and keeping up with the pace, keeping up with expectations, with technology developments and everything. And we at OCP try to help governments to keep up with that pace and find answers to a so-called new sort of reality. And there is new architecture of transparency that I will want to speak about. Very quickly, when it comes to data, just a quick mention is that the key technology solution that we focus on is, of course, good data as a fuel to the change that we want to see in public procurement. So we follow something that we call the Open Contracting Data Standards, basically a technical specifications of how to collect and publish information on public procurement that has been adopted by more than 30 countries out there. Now, but of course, as you hear in so many conferences out there, and including this one, we will hear many times is that data is not enough. The question is, what is enough? And Vivian already touched on the elements of it, and we have to keep coming back to that question: what makes change happen? And the way we look at it, I really like this slide because it has a complexity of issues here. So, but the long story short here is that the top-bottom approach has to be met with a bottom-up approach. So demand supply, you adopt the vocabulary you want, but basically what it means is that if there is, on one hand, you can have good data publication, but if there are no coalitions of change, the way we call them, expecting a change is very, very difficult. And I want to talk about coalitions of change in the spirit of objectives of today's session. And I want to do that through a specific example, a very recent, very fresh example that's been very present in my head, in our heads lately. And that is so-called Open Spending EU coalition. So I don't know if you heard about it, but the idea that it has is basically, it's a coalition that advocates for open, fair, and accountable public spending in the European Union, right? So the key goals of that coalition is basically transparent spending of the EU funds, open procurement, and company ownership transparency, right? So it's a coalition of organizations in the EU of 15 organizations, around 15 right now, and growing and counting. And the ideas of it might sound very, very big, but essentially what stands behind it is, of course, people who believe in the idea, who work in the field. So in the beginning of 2021, we sat down with a number of very close colleagues in transparency and EU spending sort of field. We've started thinking about how to really move the needle here in the European Union. We have been doing well, exceptional work in many countries, in Hungary, in Poland, in Romania, in Lithuania, in Italy, Spain, you name it. But we have not seen this dramatic shift on the EU level. And we thought that, well, we have so much knowledge, so much capacity, so much power on the ground. The key to moving the needle on the EU level is joining that power together and then trying to kind of build that power and change things on the EU level together through a strong coalition building exercise. So a bit of a story behind that is that obviously we also had a momentum of recovery spending. So you might remember Emmanuel Macron last year standing up at OGP and saying that all stimulus packages out there should be available as open data. And we as a coalition actually looked at recovery plans, and we found out that around 0 of countries actually commit to open data. So there was a lot of dissonance between statements and practice, and we've started looking at it. So we did a bit of a research looking at how much a commitment of transparency there is recovery spending, and went out really publicly in the EU. So we've had a few parliamentary hearings already. We've spoken to the European Commission about the challenges. We had some changes on the national level of countries actually integrating transparency requirements in their RRF, so-called recovery and resilience plans. And that was, all of a sudden, we've realized that we've identified a very, very interesting gap there of a situation where we have this amazing amount of money being pumped into our economies without proper transparency checks. And we felt that we do have the power and capacity to actually monitor and make sure that that money is being spent help make sure, let's not get carried away here, right, with the magnitude at hand. So in the last few months, we have been working on a very specific recommendations. And this is where I want to capture your attention specifically, is that if you are thinking about what it means to say transparency in recovery spending, not necessarily only in the European Union, but we have been working on defining what we mean by transparency of recovery spending for the purposes of the EU, but it's also applicable beyond, right? So we went into defining specific details of what we expect should be public in terms of procurement information, in terms of spending information, grants, loans, in terms of final beneficiaries, so company ownership data, and milestones, and you name it. So if you're interested in actually deconstructing a conversation about what is transparency of recovering and using these recommendations, we're very happy to share those with you. So a practical example, last week we went to Rome together with coalition leaders to work with the Anti-Corruption Agency in Italy, and you might know some faces from Italy, Davide and Francesco, from civil society, and we've been sort of thinking with the Anti-Corruption Authority and other agencies in the Italian government on how to operationalize these requirements. And I don't want to spoil too much of excitement here, but the Italian government is actually thinking about including a very strong OGP commitment around transparency in recovery spending, and we hope to be very instrumental there and to work in a very close partnership with Italian government. So as opposed to we'll keep watching as well, but we're also there to help the government to do a good job with the design of their recovery transparency package, so to say. So in other words, what did we do here? Right, so I borrowed a quote from our Ukrainian champion who said that, well, in Ukraine, rather than trying to seize as much control as possible in our own hands, the only way to address a bad situation is really to build a stakeholder coalition around open and clear contracting data. I think it's really accurate statement here, and this is what we did in the European Union. And I will approach the conclusion slowly with saying that we have been building our capacity to work with open data, open governments, open contracting, open procurement, you name it. in the last 10 years. And there is a lot of power out there in communities, a lot of capacity, a lot of expertise, a lot of tools already. And I think that we've approached the moment where we can really build power together and seek for that meaningful, drastic change in terms of company ownership, in terms of open procurement, in terms of open spending, because I think that we've already have quite some power, and building that together always works a bit better. So I'm going to conclude with relaxing our thinking, let's put it this way, and departing from open spending or procurement or finances. I borrowed this from our colleagues in Ukraine as well. It's, the analogy of what we're trying to do as open contracting partnership is really the nature, right? It's very simple. You need, for the environment to thrive, you need an ecosystem of things, which is sunshine, which is wind, rain, trees, insects, fungi, water, ground, and everything. And if you take just one out, all of a sudden you have these disturbances and distortions in ecosystem. And it's difficult to think that way when it comes to intellectual challenges, like how to make procurement better. But the least we can do is try to think that systemic change, and at the core of which is, of course, people and coalition building. So I'm going to stop here. I hope it was useful. Very happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Carol, for these updates and new achievements of OGP and your coalition. Yes, there are questions, but I'm going to ask these questions from the audience after the presentations. We still have very many interesting stuff to share to each other and to the audience. So really grateful for these insights, and I'm sure you have the flow later to go into more details that everyone is interested about. So thank you once again. We have Shandor now, who is also quite interesting achievements in regards of public procurement and related openness stuff. And I'm sure his presentation will bring the attention to this new tendencies that we are partly also covered by Carolis. And as I've seen, you have very many joint activities, and I'm really happy for these alliances that exist not only in Europe, globally. So, Shandor, please provide the information about and share with us the achievements you have at the K Monitor and the interesting projects that you have you are involved.
Thank you, Georgi, and good afternoon to all of you. It's a real pleasure to be with you, even if it's only online, but it's already great to see your faces. And when we talk about coalitions, I need to recall our great time in Tbilisi when we were launching one of the first series of the Transparent Public Procurement Rating, which was, I think, one of the first such big coalitions we were involved in, and I think it had a crucial role in highlighting how important transparency is when it comes to public procurement, and also how important the comparability of data is. We all also saw back then that throughout countries, the way how you measure the efficiency of procurement, or simply if you want to compare data, there are so many obstacles, and it laid the ground for many of the future work that we then did. I would like to connect to what Carolis was saying about opportunities and the times we're living in at the moment, the COVID pandemic, which is, I think, a great opportunity, but also, of course, a great challenge to work on these issues. It is a time when the pandemic really affected our economies and also how public services are delivered. And I think in these times, good governance is simply a crucial thing to, counter the effects of the pandemic and really save lives. So I think the pandemic made us show that what we're talking about when we talk about transparency and good governance is not just, fun or something nice to have, but it can come to lives, and it can come to the health of many peoples when, whether they have access to good medical facilities, ventilators, and other public services. Unfortunately, in Hungary, we have learned about too many cases of fraud and corruption in connection with emergency procurements. 10 millions of euros have been lost and wasted due to shady procurements of ventilators and even vaccines. And the funds were directed to the government's clientele, often just labeled as crisis-related subsidies. We could see companies that, arose of nothing without any incomes in previous years, then got a tremendous big income and business for the last year when they were, let's say, selling overpriced ventilators to the government, and then again vanished after taking out a huge dividend. This is money clearly taken from the people and from the recovery of our economies. Also, information on procurements exempted from the procurement rule laws because of the pandemic have not been published since the start of the pandemic in Hungary. There's a total lack of data on exempted procurements. And furthermore, the government has also changed access of information rules. Practically, it can take you 3 months until you get information, public information that simply makes all information during a pandemic obsolete by that time. Not surprisingly, Hungary is among the very few countries within the EU that still does not have an approved recovery plan by the EU. Clearly, the EU understood that the government has no commitments regarding good spending of public funds and transparency. And this is another opportunity for us now to advocate for at least some commitments that ensure that public funds cannot be stolen in a shameless way, as it has happened in the last decade. I think civil society in Hungary and also in the region has done a lot to counter such corrupt procedures and be, I think, fit for fighting for greater transparency. And I think in this regard, coalitions have been crucial in sharing information, in more efficiently managing resources, and also do better advocacy. So I just want to mention some of the examples we have been involved in, or projects we have been involved in recently, and that were really interesting and useful, and I think lead to further work. Regarding the topic of monitoring and analysis, we had for a couple of years the Tenders Guru project with Access Info Europe, with the Panfo Foundation, with CVO, and Funky Citizens, that aim to look at local level procurements and procurements below the EU threshold, with the aim to support those procuring entities that have less capacities and knowledge in doing better procurement. I think out of this work, we got really interesting data, and we also formulated many policy recommendations that were shared with the European Commission, but also used locally in the advocacy we do. And in this work, we could also, and here comes to the efficient use of technologies. In this work, we could also pilot a tool that was using AI in monitoring public procurements, and we could experiment in how really cutting-edge technologies can help to predict risky procurements, or simply make the monitoring of procurements much more efficient. I think, you know, and here this example is very important because, you know, in a small country such as Hungary with this very unique language, you would never be able to fund such projects or simply have all the resources to gather the data and process the data. In such coalitions with other countries, other languages, you can do much better use of your resources and use of the knowledge that your coalition partners have. So I think we made important steps here to use new tools in corruption detection. Also, I think in promoting good practices, I would mention from this year our joint projects with Transparency International Ukraine, which was about improving our red flags portal with the BI module and using the experiences with TI Ukraine in how to develop good BI tools and address the needs of your users when doing such IT developments. But not only this, I think one of very important achievements of this year's, and this was also inspired by Prozoro, was a project recently started about developing a platform for local municipalities to do below the threshold procurement. So, you know, the idea was simply when we see that the national government is not doing their purposes, let's find alternative ways in developing better tools and better techniques. And here we found committed local governments that wants to do alternative methods in procuring than what the official public procurement way is. So now a new project has been launched, and we hope it's going to be a successful one, which can be also scaled and applied in other countries as well. And then, you know, I would again refer back what Karolis was talking about. We are working in an ecosystem. All these tools and all these methods have to be combined and used together. So coming to the advocacy part, one success or surprising success we had this year, that several of our demands regarding open data connected to public procurement was incorporated in Hungary's recovery plan. Of course, these remain commitments and we cannot be sure that they're going to be implemented, but at least it led to the formulation of a common sense that even our government agreed that having access to raw machine processable high quality data is a basic must if we talk about procurement transparency. And here comes the EU level and the open spending EU coalition Karolis was mentioning. We can only make sure that, you know, these commitments are implemented on the local level or in member states or nation states if there is a stronger pressure from below, and in our case that's EU directives and EU laws. So simply if the EU has legislation that makes sure that member states cannot avoid publishing such data, then even countries that don't comply with, you know, the standards we are hoping for, or that are informally taken as basic rules, it can be made sure that, you know, citizens will still have access to such data. And I think also on the EU level, there is a lot to do. It's still, I think, a shame that EU citizens have no access to EU spending data in a central manner. You have to collect it practically from member states' databases when it comes to EU funds and EU subsidies. And also regarding procurement data, I think the TED, the European Tenders Daily, is lacking crucial information that should be shared with citizens. So I think in only such broad coalitions that enable constant information sharing, efficient allocation of knowledge and capacities, and investment into expensive technologies often can ensure that civil society can keep up with the corrupt actors that act beyond borders and have strong lobbying powers and practically endless amounts of funds for their activities. So, as said, I think it's crucial to take the pandemic as an opportunity to jointly advocate for better and transparent procurements. And I think the crisis has shown how vulnerable our societies are and how corruption can deprive us from good services if we don't act together and if we don't pay attention to these things. So that would be my short summary from the Hungarian angle. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Shandor. Actually, it was not only Hungarian, it was quite broad, and it was, I'm sure, very interesting for those who are following us and attending the conference. You are promoting lots of tools for improved public procurement, and it's really important, and creating alliances, I'm sure, will even more contribute to the goals that we as the advocates of improved and better public procurement had. So with this, actually, we have one of the champions in public procurement, Ukraine, and Kristina Zelinska, who is representing Transparency International, can only share good results, and those results that near Transparency International Ukraine and our Ukrainian colleagues can share to the other world. And I think that these achievements can really contribute to those of sharing of good practices that countries can use, especially during the COVID pandemic that Shandor have been talking about. And I'm sure that these challenges that COVID-19, in particular to public procurement, has caused is very similar to our countries. So, Kristina, we are all ears to you, and we are really looking forward to listening to your presentation, that I'm sure will be very interesting.
Hey, thank you a lot for having me here. It's a great pleasure to join this very interesting discussion. Public procurement, the part of my heart, and ProZorro system is something very wonderful that we have the chance to work with. And today we are talking more about some achievements in different countries, and our colleagues already talked about ProZorro system, the Zorro system, and case of Ukraine. And I'll maybe tell more about why ProZorro is so popular and why we now on the first place in the Transparent Public Procurement Rating, which conducted by IDFI. We are very proud of our achievements in Ukraine, but we also have different problems as many different countries. We have our internal situations, internal policies and politics, which have different initiatives. So every day of our life is something like fighting against corruption and fighting against some, strange legislative initiatives in public procurement. And maybe you understand me, because in different countries after in new elections, we have different points of view how our policy must be provided in public procurements at the same time. So actually, if you are talking about case of Ukraine and why ProZorro is so good and one of the most maybe excellent, sorry, public procurement system in the world. I would like to talk more about the story of Prozoro and about the context, how it was provided and implemented. Today we are talking more about alliances of civic society organizations, but we believe that strong alliance will be if we engage not only civic society organizations, but also business and governmental representatives. The story of Prozoro and our public procurement reform started back in 2014, actually, when after Revolution of Dignity of Ukraine, maybe all of you probably know about that historical facts in our country, the group of volunteers just suggested to implement electronization of all the process in public procurement. And after that, we TI Ukraine actually was the organization that from the very beginning built, administrated, and support this e-procurement system. And after some time, we successfully transferred it to the government of Ukraine. So already 5 years, Ukraine had a new online procurement system and more equal rules of this game, which names procurement. So firstly, thanks to the golden triangle of partnership between civic society organizations, government, and business, we have great achievements for today. But we talk a lot also about transparency, accountability, and a lot of people think that only just transparency and good policy, good legislation, will fight corruption one time, and we will not meet it one more time again. But no, of course, transparency and accountability will not rule out corruption. The systems we are building in our countries will not, just only them, will not shock the corrupt person through the computer. Therefore, we need to build a comprehensive approach to the fight against corruption. The first minimum step we can do is reducing the risk of corruption through transparent rules of the game, through open data, strong community, and good policy, good governance. In Ukraine, just 5 years ago, we have actually nothing which can called like open data in public procurement. So now we have a lot of open data. Thanks for Prozoro. Thanks for that system that open a lot of information in different transactions, actually from 1 hryvnia till different huge numbers in spending of budget money. We now built, thanks for open data, different business intelligence models, different sources which helps Ukrainians, investors, state-owned enterprises, organizers in procurement, procurement entities to plan their expenditures or to plan for business their ways of competition, etc., etc., etc. Also, it helps us as taxpayers to control how the government spent our money. Now we build different instruments, and maybe you probably know some about them, or you heard about them, as I think key organization in public procurement reform community in Ukraine, we felt responsibility. After building and creating the system for public procurement, Prozoro, we decided to provide another tools which will help to analyze all that processes that we have in Prozoro. So 5 years ago, we provided, we developed and implemented such business intelligence models like public BI, professional BI, and medical BI. In 2019, 2020, we had COVID-19. So we also in Ukraine had simplified procedures in public procurement for procure some medication, etc., some masks, etc., for fighting against COVID-19. But there were a lot of spendings for these purchasings, and we also published all COVID-19 procurement data on Prozoro. And we, STI Ukraine, provided special BI model for immediate analyzing the market and budget spendings in this field of procurement. So actually in Ukraine, we help to understand public procurement better for ordinary citizen and taxpayer. Also, what about our community? During the last 5 years, we are still building and working with our community, which calls Dozoro. You maybe also heard about it. It's our great successful case in Ukraine. We united more than 200 persons, journalists, business representatives, different NGOs, etc., and local civic activists in our community to fighting against corruption in public procurement. And not only for fighting against corruption. Dozoro is a civic control over public procurement, and it also helps us to provide necessary changes in public procurement legislation to make public procurement more better in Ukraine, and it consists of different parts. So the first part and the main part of Dozoro is our community. It consists of, as I've already said, more than 200 people. We had our agents on the local level. They help public procurement entities to do procurement more on the more professional level. They consult business, NGOs, journalists, and public procurement entities how procurements need to be done. Another part of Dozoro is monitoring infrastructure, is our business intelligence models, COVID-19 model, medical model, etc., and also it's our public portal, Dozoro. Also, it calls dozoro.org. It integrated all procurements from Prozoro database, and on this portal, it's like something, a booking or TripAdvisor, where you can in Ukraine leave some complaint or your feedback about the quality of public procurement in Ukraine. So you can rate a public procurement entity or some procurement participant, or actually specific procurement, and our NGOs, which are united in our community, react on these feedbacks, and they control procurements with potential risks, corruption risks, and potential violations. They prepare specific letters for example, governmental state bodies which provide control in public procurement, and they actually provide very comprehensive approach in public procurement monitoring. Another part of our community is our legal support. We analyze and monitor all legislation initiatives. We provide some legal advices for our stakeholders, for Economic Committee in Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. So we cooperate with different stakeholders, decision makers on the national and the local levels for advocating the best practices and the necessary rules and changes in public procurement. And the last part of the Zoro project is our researches that we also provide in different fields, markets in public procurement system in Ukraine. In Ukraine, we also provide in 2018 a ProZoro system online monitoring by the key state control body, financial body in public procurement, which calls State Audit Service of Ukraine. They started procurement monitoring through their own electronic cabinets. Anyone can actually observe State Audit Service monitoring and check why this particular tender has been selected for inspection. And actually, what about changes in Ukrainian public procurement game, and what about transparent public procurement rating? Competition is also very good idea. Every rating encourages you to competition, and like doing business, corruption perception index, or TPPR, of course. And we are talking about different rating, they become a benchmark for decision making for many countries, for many governments, because one of the best things that people came up with is competition. And this rating makes for improving us. During the last years, we made a new assessment according to TPPR, and in 2016 we were the first, but time is ticking away, and we needed to improve ourselves. So this rating helps us to provide and implement necessary changes for open more data in public procurement, for electronize more processes in public procurement via ProZoro system. And Ukraine now again at the top of this international rating. And after more than 3 years, after 2016, we understood that what new changes we should to implement. And that is why TI Ukraine, with group of stakeholders of Ministry of Economy, state-owned enterprise ProZoro, which administrates ProZoro system, and other NGOs, partners from our Zoro community, advocated necessary changes in legislation in public procurement. Before making new proposition to Ukrainian public procurement legislation, we had analyzed the indicators of methodology of TPPR, where Ukraine had small points. And during the last 3 years, we had twice changed our public procurement legislation. And that is why we decided to assess our position of TPPR again in 2018. And now we are again on the top. Of course, the score in the rating is an important and pleasant achievement, but is not a reason for us to sit down and chill. We still have some issues and challenges we need to work on. For example, now in Ukraine, there is a legislation initiative on the localization and giving the preferences for local producers. And it can completely roll back the public procurement reform in Ukraine. And not only the expert community was about the dangers of localization, but even the cabinet itself, cabinet of ministries itself. So actually, I'm gonna to finish my speech, and I'll maybe repeat words of Karlis. He talked about maybe good formula of good reform, maybe yes, in public procurement. When we are talking about reform in public procurement, we need to think more about its sustainability. Sustainable reform, it's something which live after our implementation, after our changes, and after we left this work, and another people will continue our work. It's equal rules for open data, possibility for a community of different sides of NGOs, business and government for cooperation, and good policymakers which are able to provide and implement this policy, to discuss this policy as in the different democracy countries. Thank you so much for attention.
Christina, thank you very much. It was really, as always, it was very interesting to listen to the development of Bazoro and Bazoro systems in Ukraine, and I think this was a very motivation to other countries to have such kind of public procurement, electronic public procurement systems in their countries. Now moving to transparent public procurement rating, and we do not have much time for the discussion and for the questions to be answered from the audience. So I kindly ask Sandra to present about the development of TPPR network, the network that assesses legislation of public procurement in various countries. And currently we have 40 countries on board. As I mentioned, we started with the several countries of the Eastern Partnership region and Eurasia region, and then this network became global, and we have countries joining from Africa, Asia, Latin America, and Europe, and we think that this can be a very important tool for different organizations to advocate for improvements in public procurement. So I will stop here and give floor to Sandra to speak more about the achievements we had in the frames of TPPR network and advocacy, and what can be done in future to have a stronger balances on improving public procurement legislation with practice.
Thank you very much, Georgi. First of all, it's great to be on the panel. This is the first time I've had an opportunity to participate in this kind of event. And of course, TPPR has already come up multiple times during discussion. Actually, a lot of the people on this panel are great supporters. Of course, Shandor with K-Monitor is our partner in Hungary. TI Ukraine is our partner in Ukraine. And I think TPPR is well familiar with our panelists, but for those in attendance who might not know too much about the project, I would like to discuss it before I move on to highlighting some of the examples of more successful advocacy and changes in the legislation. But before I do that, I do want to note that IDFI in general takes participation in this kind of global or regional initiatives very seriously. Of course, we have been big cheerleaders for OGP in Georgia. As you know, Georgi has been on the steering committee, and it has really yielded some great results here. In addition to that, for example, IDFI was the regional coordinator for Eastern Europe and Central Asia for the Open Data Barometer this year, which incidentally did have procurements as one of the components for assessment. But myself today, I will be talking about TPPR. So TPPR, as has been noted already, is our global initiative launched in 2016, and the main goal of TPPR is to create a rating of countries in terms of how well their public procurement legislation ensures the level of transparency that is necessary to achieve the goals of fighting corruption and eliminating the incidence of misuse of public funds. And we believe that the initiative has been quite successful in a number of ways in this regard. So we do so through a comprehensive assessment methodology that is based on a number of examples of international best practice, standards, and aspects of other methodologies. For example, the OECD methodology and principles, the EU directives, the open contracting data standard, and others. And all of the assessments are conducted by our local partners in the country. As I said, some of these partners are here on the panel with us, and then we compile the data and publish it as a rating on our website. So the rationale behind having this explicitly in the form of a rating is, among other reasons, the fact that simply put, governments like to look good, and as such, we think that achieving a higher result in the rating can be a form of a motivator and an incentive in itself for the governments to eliminate the deficiencies in their public procurement legislations that we identified through the evaluation. And while the TPPR is quite good at helping our partners and the local governments identify these weaknesses, we also know from our experience, which I will be discussing momentarily, that the rating can be leveraged to push for reforms and to achieve positive results. And this naturally, as Georgi already noted, comes in the form of benefits to advocacy efforts with the ability to back any push for reforms with this international rating that offers a kind of clear line of comparison between countries and that offers recommendations for improvement. So before I move on to our examples, I wanted to speak just a little bit about what happens from our side as IDFI is running TPPR. So we try to support the network in multiple ways. The first is, of course, by facilitating the exchange of experience and expertise. This comes through the sharing of news, articles, and other publications. In the beginning of this year, my colleagues who were previously working on TPPR before I joined the project published a very comprehensive report through year 2020, so covering the period from 2016 to 2020, which I will share in the chat with everyone shortly. And the report had a very detailed breakdown of each country's performance and offered custom tailored recommendations for improvement. Of course, in addition to highlighting some of the positive aspects of their public procurement legislations. We are currently looking at updating the rating again, so to include everything through this year, 2021, and thereby reflects any changes and developments in our member states. And of course, we are constantly looking for new partners and new member states so that we expand the network. Before the pandemic, with the support of our local partners, we also used to organize advocacy visits within the framework of TPPR, where we and our partner local CSOs would meet with the representatives of the government and discuss the assessment results and the steps to take next. And hopefully we will be able to resume doing so after the pandemic situation is resolved. So all of this brings us to some of the specific examples that I wanted to highlight. These are, of course, by no means comprehensive. We have a lot more positive developments evident across TPPR members that could be highlighted. These are simply the examples I chose for our discussion today. So the first one I wanted to speak about comes from Kyrgyzstan, which joined the TPPR network back in 2018. So the initial assessment covered the period from 2016 to 2018. And following the publication of our assessment, Kyrgyzstan was in the process of developing its OGP action plan. And as such, IDFI provided several recommendations which the government took into account, and TPPR was cited in the action plan when they were coming up with specific commitments to improve their PPL. And these changes were slowly implemented, and in December 2020, so about a year ago, amendments were made to the public procurement legislation that introduced some innovations and improvements that were much needed, such as, for example, new obligations to publish specific information that was previously not there. There were changes made to the public procurement portal, which added a ton of new tools for increased transparency and increased engagement with the public. A similar positive example we had from Costa Rica with great changes to the public procurement legislation. Specifically, this came in the form of a 2019 bill with some comprehensive changes to the legislation, and TPPR was cited in its preamble as one of the tools for identifying these much needed changes. And I was just recently informed by a local partner there, Mr. Vargas from Accessa, that after a number of revisions, some of which took into account the analysis and recommendations from Accessa, as well as other local CSOs, the new public procurement law was approved recently and will enter into force in December 2022. So hopefully by next year, we will be able to conduct another round of assessments for Costa Rica and see the progress in this regard reflected in its rating in TPPR. Our partners from Venezuela, the law firm Despacho de Abogados Gil and Rosas, have been actively working with the Venezuelan Chamber of Consulting Companies to draft new PPL, and they have told me that it will be hopefully submitted for consideration next year, and TPPR has been extremely useful to them in identifying the necessary changes to the law. And I'm very hopeful that we will see some results from this effort, and Venezuela's position in the rating will improve from this. It currently stands quite low. I believe it is in the 38th spot out of 41. So we will see if these efforts pay off positively. Vivian actually noted some examples that I wanted to bring up from Kenya. Our partner there has been active with the local and regional CISO groups in pushing for reforms, and we have seen some positive results from there as well. For example, improved transparency through increased reporting and updating of the public procurement information portal, which takes into account the open contracting data standard in the publication of the information, as well as the establishment of new oversight authorities, which also has led to enhanced transparency. And these and other measures were something that TPPR that we recommended as a result of the TPPR assessment. And finally, before we move on to questions, I wanted to speak a little bit about our current ongoing developments. So Colombia was the most recent addition to TPPR, and our partners deemed the assessment particularly urgent because they were in the process of starting a series of complex negotiations with the Colombian government regarding the enactment of a new anti-corruption and transparency policy. And so TPPR would be very useful in drawing some additional attention to this topic, maybe from the media or from other local partners. Similarly, our a new partner is currently in the process of assessment, and they were actually introduced to us by Karolis. This is happening in Kosovo, and the assessment was initially planned to be conducted later on, but because Kosovo was in the process of amending the PPL, and the changes were supposed to be accepted in this month in December, but unfortunately it didn't go as planned. And so our partners thought that TPPR assessment would be a good opportunity to kind of build momentum for pushing the changes through. So once again, these are just some of the examples of the work within the framework of TPPR, and hopefully they have been illustrative of how the rating as well as similar global initiatives can be very helpful in leading to tangible, concrete improvements in public procurement systems. And of course, we, IDFI, are very committed to continuing our work in this direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sandro, for sharing information about TPPR network and the achievements, which is especially inspiring others to be joining this network. I want to mention that TPPR was the joint initiative of IDFI and the Open Society Foundation, and later he was supporting assessments of public procurement legislation in certain countries. But currently IDFI is keeping this project and tries to expand, as Sandro mentioned, in different countries. And we think that this is, together with the other tools presented today, as one of the good instruments and tools to further improve public procurements. And we encourage everyone interested in becoming the partners of the network to contact us, and we will be happy to provide all necessary support to have our network increase and have better results. Now we have very few minutes left to have the questions and answers. We had a question to Karolis, anonymous attendee, asked such a question. Karolis, in context of EU funding projects monitoring, does the coalition you are describing monitor tenders organized by EC and its structures regarding selection of consultancy companies, consortia to implement TA projects, in particular to support public procurement reforms in partner countries? And we also have another question. Please go ahead, Karolis, and I'll go forward with another question from the audience.
Thank you so much for the question. Very, very relevant. And I understand where it's coming from. The idea behind the coalition is that we want to provide a framework for understanding what to watch out for. Right? So we provide a methodology, and then we help to implement it. We cannot assume responsibility for monitoring European Commission plus 27 countries. Right? We will do our best with local partners, and we are fundraising currently to actually run the methodology across the EU, but that is something we cannot commit to. But the idea is to be able to do that through partnership. So for example, a couple of weeks ago, we partnered with this consortia of investigative journalists who are who will run the monitoring project for the upcoming years from the investigative stories angle. And we're very happy to help them with connections, with data, with building their capacity, understanding corruption risks and everything. But in the end, they will do the job. So I hope that we will also have a good partner to monitor our EU institutions, tenders, and look at that issue you are referring to.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I would kindly ask those who are attending raise their hands in case they have questions. As question, we have another question also from the Thank you. Thank you very much for the interesting presentations. I have two questions. Both of these questions are addressed generally to panelists who will be willing to answer. First question, in regards to corresponding the goals and objectives of transparent public procurement to Global Agenda 2030, what are the most crucial SDGs which would be achieved as a result of implementing the standards of transparent public procurement? Who do you see the role? How do you see the role and place of TPPR among the global initiatives? Thank you. I think this is probably to TPPR network. First of all, I think the goals is I have listed goals of SDGs that can be covered by the transparent public procurement in general, and these goals are I think especially starting from the goal 12, ensuring sustainable consumption and production patterns, which names public procurement directly, but in fact other SDG goals, including SDG 8, 9, 12, 16, and 17, and we are talking about the coalitions and alliances, and which is directly related to SDGs goal 17, stronger coalition. So I think these are the general SDG connections and links to public procurement improvement, and I think that generally improved public procurement supports to the main idea of sustainable agenda. No one should be left behind, and to somehow address the poverty reduction, which is the major idea of sustainable agenda 2030. So I think that public procurement is directly response to the SDG agenda. If anyone would like to add, I would be happy to.
Just maybe a quick shout on what we are thinking about in terms of sustainable development goals, or generally sustainability. I agree with everything you said, Georgi. The question is how good public procurement can also address these issues. So we are working on, for example, understanding how better procurement data can promote the uptake of green procurement. We are trying to understand how better data can promote the women-owned businesses, for example. How can procurement produce an impact that promotes equality with the focus on gender equality as well? So we're thinking about how to engage small, medium enterprises. And there is a series of fields, so to say, where procurement can be super influential. And think of it as the largest purchasing power of governments. Up to 20% of GDP goes through procurement, which has a huge power to shape markets, right? So when it comes to sustainability, it's a huge tool governments have to promote it. And just to say that OCP, Open Contracting Partnership, together with Open Government Partnership and other organizations, are thinking very actively on how to employ open government principles in promoting these agendas as well.
Yeah, of course, I agree with all of that. And I think just on the very basic level, transparency is the biggest obstacle to corruption. And as Georgi noted in his introductory notes, up to 25% of the value of contracts can be lost due to corruption. So, promoting more transparency in public procurements will help save these costs that can be then directed to greater prosperity and to achieving the goals of the global 2030 agenda. So, in that very basic regard, transparency and openness in public procurement is absolutely vital.
Unfortunately, we are ran of time. So we are discussing a topic which is endless, and we can speak for hours, if not more, about the importance of improved and open, transparent public procurement, open data, and open contracting, and the standards that we are already shared, and also the others that can come to our mind. And I think that all new meetings that we are organizing, we are sharing new information to each other, the new achievements and success stories. And this is very important. And very soon today, Helen Derbyshire from Access Info has shared the link to the next very interesting session that will be also talking and discussing about the open spending in EU coalition measures on this. And I think it's as I said, a topic that can be discussed a lot. And I think we tried to address to these challenges. We tried with this panel to cover the issue of public procurement, coalitions and alliances, and how we can better move forward in this regard. And we had a number of participants attending, giving questions, and I'm sure that in future we can once again meet in person, that we really miss each other, and we can slowly, but the pandemic is ending, and I'm sure that next year will be the year we can come back to the normal life, and we have the opportunity to see each other, which I'm really looking forward to. Once again, I would like to thank to all of you, dear speakers and panelists, for agreeing to participate and sharing very interesting information to us, to those who listened to us, who followed on the Facebook and also participated in the Zoom. And I'm really grateful for these insights, and I'm sure that everybody will are happy with the presentations. And me personally, I can say that I was very happy to see you, to listen to you, and thanks to OGP for keeping us active. And we look forward to opening the OGP summit tomorrow, that will gather lots of expertise, lots of interesting people to discuss lots of interesting topics related to good and open government. So with this, I would like to thank you all and wish you a very successful day and week, because we have, as I said, lots of interesting stuff coming from tomorrow. So thank you, and thank to my team for organizing and technical support. And despite that, I have a lot of noise behind me, as I'm in a big venue with lots of people walking around. I think we managed it and we made it. So thank you, and wish you a good day.
Thank you very much, everyone.